Hey everybody, this is Norm, and you are listening to Mastering the Ascent. Today's episode is all about decision making. Nothing in this world goes round without first making the decision, the definitive commitment to do the thing that you're going to do. Sometimes I very passionately believe that the only thing that holds us back from anything that we want to do in our lives is just the simple act of making a decision and taking that first step, wholeheartedly committing to the thing that we're going to do and pushing forward with it. Arnold, what do you think about that?
Yeah, it's all about making real decisions. And I think too often what people do is they make halfway decisions, like they give themselves outs. And then further than that, I think people add too much complexity to their decisions. And we talk about complexity is the enemy of execution. And what that really means is because the decision making is too complex and it's all in our minds, we get tangled up in it and we suffer from analysis paralysis. We're trying to figure out what is the optimal path all in our heads, right? Because usually everyone does it in their heads. And I do this way too often. I honestly think I got good at it. But the reality is you got to put things down on paper. You need to crystallize your thoughts, right? And writing helps a lot. Even just quick notes help a lot. This is what I've started to use more often because it really clarifies your thoughts when it comes to taking action and making real decisions. And so there's a level of complexity I think that people need to overcome. And so that's why I say all the time, simplify the task until you make a decision, until you take an action, because we know that execution is the most important thing. So like you said, making decisions is the most important thing that you can do. And I say this all the time as a facilitator of being a problem solver in the engineering world. When you bring a whole bunch of people together of multiple disciplines, and we're all trying to figure out the optimal way to solve a problem, and you can jot stuff up on a board. I do that all the time to facilitate the discussion, to capture good ideas, capture good options, understand the consequences of our options, understand the constraints. And we can apply these things to our own life. We can apply them in simple ways. Should I buy a house? Now there's a complexity there, right? Like what can you afford? And should you go to grad school? There's a certain level of complexity to it. And I think because that complexity exists, we put it outside our mind, we resist overcoming the analysis paralysis, and then ultimately we just don't make decisions. And then by not making decisions, we eventually become resentful of ourselves and live a life full of much more regret because we're never doing any of the things that we want to do.
Yeah, I totally agree and sympathize with what you say, because sometimes when it comes to decision making, I really believe that the result that you're going after is the point of decision. So during our Jeff Bliss podcast, which is going to come out next week, we talked about people making the decision to quit smoking. And, I personally am a person who believes that the decision is what is almost the result of quitting. Right? So if I haven't quit yet, it was because I didn't decide to quit. So you got to make that decision and you got to fully commit and fully sell out to it. And I think a lot of people have a difficult time doing that, especially in today's day and age. There's so much stimulus that's around us. And there's so many different people with different opinions and different ideas and different, social inputs telling us to be a certain way or do a certain thing or act a certain way, that it's almost like it builds up a lot of fear for people. And they're horrified of actually making that decision and making that commitment, because what if, somebody feels like they're wrong? And my opinion on that is just, who cares? Who cares if you're wrong? Make the decision, take the action, do the thing that needs to be done for whatever it is. And if you're wrong, you're going to learn and you're going to adjust from that, and you're going to make a different decision the next time around, maybe.
Yeah, well put, because you need to make a decision. Like you got to get that in your head. You need to make decisions toward the outcomes that you are pursuing. You need clarity on those outcomes. Like, what are the results you want, right? And we do this in the engineering world. What are the metrics that we measure success by? And we try to get as clear as we can. Are we going to get 10% more efficient? Are we going to save $100,000? What is the number, right? Because without that outcome, it's really hard to pave the path. But I like identifying the results that you're looking for, be super clear about that. And then you can dig into what are my different options for this. And then along the way, challenge the constraints, challenge the status quo. Because sometimes you're thinking of how to solve your problems and how to make that decision within a box. And it's hard to see the box when you're in it. So hopefully you have a good team around you that can allow you to pull you outside that box and really challenge those consequences. And if I can just share a military story, because I was thinking of decision making as an air controller, and I know I share a lot of military stories because they're badass. But here's the thing. I was in a training scenario and I was controlling air, and I had a unmanned aerial vehicle. It's a UAV. And it didn't have any ordnance on it or anything. It's a training scenario. And we are in a scenario where we're going to be completely overrun by the enemy. And the intent was to see how American forces would react and how we would execute with overwhelming odds. And I got to be the air controller. I was like, heck yeah, send me in. And all I had was this UAV. It had no weapons on it. They told me that. It doesn't have anything it can shoot. All you can do is see. All you can do is see the enemy activity and communicate to the U.S. forces. So I'm watching all these U.S. forces come in, and we start taking fire. You know, it's all simulation rounds, but you're hearing explosions. They have ground burst simulators around me. So, and I'm out in the California deserts. So it felt like Afghanistan. And things are blowing up, exploding. People are shooting rounds. And I'm talking to this aircraft, and he's telling me, there's 100 enemy forces coming up over the hill. And I'm telling the commander, we're going to be overrun, and we're taking casualties. We're taking casualties so much in this scenario that Tactical Operations Center is blown up, simulated blown up, but they throw a simulator in there and there's smoke coming out of it. They got simulators of really dark black smoke so that it looks as if you're actually in a combat zone. And I'm talking to this aircraft. And it occurs to me that this might be a multi-million-dollar aircraft, but I think I should fly this thing into 30 of those enemy forces. And I'm like, just fly it in there. This thing isn't helping us anymore. We're overrun. The best thing that I can do, at least in my head, and I didn't have a commander at the time because he was, killed in action. I told myself, I'm going to fly this UAV into the enemy forces. And it was simulated, but it actually took out 30 or so of their enemy forces. We ultimately got overrun, which was the intent of this scenario. I knew we weren't going to win that war. It was a learning experience for all of us. But the point of my story is I challenged the constraints, right? We think that we need weapons. We think that I need ordnance on that aircraft. If my mind didn't think outside the box and remember that that camera that's looking at something is a giant aircraft full of fuel and that could do some damage, I wouldn't have thought to fly that aircraft into that group of enemy forces. Now, we lost the fight, but we made a hell of an impact. It's outside of the box thinking, you know what I mean? And up to this point, we've spoken about being results focused. And then right now we're actually getting into thinking about what your options are when it comes to decision making, because I think identifying your options now in that scenario, I had to be quick on my feet. I had to have a creative moment. In civilian life, we can assess our options over a period of time. And my point is just, we think we have to go from point A to point B to point C, and ask a thought-provoking question. What if that's not necessarily true? What if I could get from point A to point C quicker, cheaper, more efficient? And how would I go about that? Because those questions can give you creative ideas and they can give you better options. And the assessment of options will reduce your stress. So when you actually make that decision, it's easier for you to make the decision if you actually assess the options. You know the consequences because you evaluated it in a sense. That's what I would challenge people to do, is understand your results, assess your options as thoroughly as you can, challenge the constraints within those options. And now we can get into understanding the consequences of those options.
So I love the idea of just thinking outside of the box and understanding that when you're assessing a decision and trying to determine what that decision is, there's always an option D. You're constantly thinking through A, B, and C. And I think what a lot of times what people do is they get wrapped up in A, B, and C, and they fall into that analysis paralysis. None of those seem like great options, so it's so hard to make that decision, and I just can't do it. And in your scenario that you brought up, you came up with something that was totally outside of the realm of anything anybody was thinking about, went for D, committed to it, and went after it regardless of what, I guess I shouldn't say regardless of what the result was going to be. I'm sure you probably had some sort of calculation running in your mind what was going to happen as a result of that. But recognizing that that was something that was the right move in that moment, and then having the courage to take the action and make that decision to move forward with it. I think that's where a lot of times people get lost at.
Yeah, there's fear hidden in there. That's why people have analysis paralysis, because they're afraid of the consequences of their decisions. And we know what the outcomes are that we're looking for. And now when you look at your options, you start looking at the consequences. What are the upsides? What are the downsides? Because there's always ups and downs to any decision that you're going to make. And by laying all these options out and starting to evaluate it and looking at the upsides and downsides to these decisions, now you can mitigate risk. And the mitigation of risk by picking one of those options, knowing that you have to make a decision, I think that that's an important thing for people to realize, is you have to make decisions. There is the potential for failure, of course. And like you said, there's a learning from that, but you're mitigating failure as much as possible. And then you're going to act on that. And so assessing those, evaluating those options, I think is the best tool that people can use to reduce the amount of fear that they feel. And so the evaluation and the mitigation of failure within your options is going to really help people make decisions and understand that they've mitigated the risk as much as possible. And then after that, it's just execute at the highest intensity and focus that you can execute at to get the results that you're looking for. And I believe more often than not, depending on how big of a game you're going to play, you're going to get those results.
Yeah. And I think in the business world, just in general, the people who pull ahead and who succeed are the people who make those decisions quick and effectively and move. They take action on that quick and effectively. And those are the ones, especially in a capitalistic society. And, that's what makes a capitalistic society so freaking great, is that people are continuously competing to create better and better things and advance society in a better and better way. So the people who are able to make those decisions, not be held back by fear, and quickly move on those are the people who pull ahead in the marketplace. And that's isn't just from a entrepreneurial standpoint too. It's in any job that you're in as well. People are after the people who are able to effectively make those decisions, do that risk analysis, make the decision, move and execute quickly, and then adjust along the way, overcome any roadblocks that come along, and learn from any mistake that might pop up. But I always say this, the fastest way from point A to point B is to make the decision and go. It's a straight line, right? You're going to run into obstacles, but you don't need to necessarily go too far beyond that simple risk analysis, writing down, understanding what the things are that are the inputs to that decision, and then make the decision and go. And you see that over and over again throughout all these companies that pull ahead in the marketplace, is they're not afraid to go after things that are a little bit outside of the box, and they're not afraid to make the decision and move. And I think that's going to continue to build on itself more and more and more as we get into the information age and as we're dealing with things like technology. Everybody's out there with tech trying to solve the problem. I believe the people who make the decision on the direction to go, bring it to the marketplace, and then adjust along the way are the people who pull ahead in that industry and are going to be the people who continue to push us forward throughout society. If you're having trouble getting over or having the inability to make decisions, that is like, in my mind, it's one of the number one things that you have to work on immediately. And you got to make that switch. You got to flip the switch and recognize that, you're not going to make every decision perfectly. They're not all going to be right, but they have to be made, and they have to be made effectively and quickly.
As you start making decisions, you get better at that assessment. I believe you do.
Well, it's a skill just like anything else.
It's a skill. Yeah. You can build a skill of procrastination, or you can build a skill of execution. And so you'll get better at making decisions. And then whatever endeavor you're pursuing, you'll grow an expertise in that. And those decisions will become more clear because you'll gain knowledge and you'll gain experience. And so you have to start down that path. You have to make real decisions. If you want to change your life, if you want to improve your health, if you want to improve your financial situation, all of those require you to make real decisions. And if you're distracted by, like Norm said, social media, too much stimulus, too much input, you need to find time away. You need to find quiet time, and you need to get a notepad and a pen, and you need to write your thoughts out, and you need to write your options out. If it's a serious decision, you need to be serious about how you approach the problem. And, that's what the professional does. The professional goes to work. So get out there, make real decisions, make tough decisions. Don't procrastinate. Simplify the solution until you take action. This is Mastering the Ascent. Keep climbing.